Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss what Trump has been saying in the last 24 hours as he threatens 100% tariffs on Russia, urges Zelenskyy to take the fight to Putin, and dismisses Nigel Farage's latest piece of sycophancy. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So before we get on to the rather more serious business of how Trump now sees the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which is a world away from how he saw it a few months ago, let's kick off with Trump dismissing Farage, because the difference we're seeing from Trump certainly justifying the careful diplomacy that Starmer and other European leaders have been investing in him. He's now dismissing the sycophantic carping of Farage and telling Zelenskyy to unleash hell on Putin. It's been announced that President Trump is going to have his unprecedented second full state visit to the UK, which has never happened before for any president, at a time when Parliament goes into recess this autumn for the conference season. Now, it's thought that the timing has been done that way in order to take away the possibility of pressure for Trump to address Parliament, as Presidents Obama and Biden did before him. And of course, President Macron of France did last week. Only Nigel Farage was spitting feathers about it. Oh, it's an absolute disgrace. I demand Parliament be recalled so that my big orange daddy can address Parliament. Clearly done to stir up shit and try to drive a wedge between the UK and US governments because Farage is the opposite of patriotic. Or maybe Nigel Farage just thought it would be his best chance to be in the same room as Trump, as he seems to be struggling to get noticed by the orange one these days. Only he's failed again. The BBC's Gary O'Donoghue has interviewed President Trump and asked him specifically about this issue of, being invited over while Parliament's in recess. Let them go and have a good time, Trump said to it. When he was suggested to him, oh, Nigel Farage, your mate Nigel Farage is saying we should recall Parliament so you can speak to them. Trump just said, word for word, let them go and have a good time. Clearly doesn't give a shit, does he? And Farage has once again chapped his lips on the orange one's rump for no gain at all. In fact, as has been happening for this second term in general, he's only made a fool of himself. No wonder Farage looks like he's been sucking on lemons all day at the moment. Didn't get invited to the inauguration, but Boris Johnson did. Couldn't get his personal photo op after the assassination attempt, despite spending 2 weeks in America desperately trying. And now can't even get Trump to be pissed off that his state visit has been gamed in order to avoid awkward diplomacy. And given that Trump is quite open about not sharing Starmer's politics, but being happy to work with him anyway, it's a testament to just how well Labour are at least playing the international game, that Farage is completely failing at kicking a hornet's nest at our foreign policies. But so much for Farage's attempt to weaken the UK relationship with the US, like the Russian asset he strives to be. What about the more important situation in Ukraine? So, regardless of how serious Trump will ultimately be about his tariff threats against Russia, especially he hasn't exactly been serious about heavy tariffs anywhere else for long, has he? It seems to now be the case that the US president at least sees Putin as not serious about ending the war under any realistic conditions. In fact, there were a couple of aspects to Trump's focus on squeezing Russia. The first is that threat of tariffs, which Moscow doesn't seem to be taking seriously. It looks like the Russians are also familiar with the story of the boy who cried wolf. But the second move was supplying Ukraine with weapons. Now, these are being paid for by Europe, not the United States. But that's obviously how things need to work with Trump now. The important thing is that Ukraine gets the weapons, gets the right weapons, and enough weapons to defend itself. Because Trump isn't very good with detail, so we don't really know if the supplies will be enough. We don't know much about those supplies. We know it includes Patriot missile systems. We know it includes some other things. We don't know how much. We don't know exactly what. However, Trump reportedly said that Zelenskyy should use the weapons to pressure Putin by not just focusing on Moscow, but St. Petersburg. Now, obviously, Ukraine is going to continue to attack targets permitted by international law, but interesting insight into how Trump now views the conflict. By advising Ukraine to hit Putin where it will hurt him, he's saying that he recognises Putin needs to be hurt and that Ukraine should be the ones to do it. This is a much bigger turnaround than a lot of people I think are giving it credit for. A few months ago, he was giving the strong impression that Putin had reasonable objectives and that Zelenskyy was the barrier to peace. Now it's flipped completely around. Trump is still clearly wanting to be friends with Putin, but is now openly disappointed with his idol. He recalled how he would have a call with Putin and he would tell his wife, who was Slovenian, so knows all about Russian antics, that he'd just finished this call with Putin. It went very well. And she would respond, "That's nice, dear. Russia's just bombed the crap out of another Ukrainian city again." This is Trump's retelling as well. So he's openly admitting that Putin has been stringing him along. And Ukrainians today have been quick to praise Melania Trump for her apparent role in pointing out what Putin really is to her husband. So although Trump's press conference with Russia was as muddled as they always are, there were definite changes here. He is basically urging Ukraine to take the fight to Russia and hurt them in order to make Putin feel he has something to lose. Because even Trump sees the problem in getting Putin to the negotiating table. If Putin is in a game where, okay, he's not guaranteed to win, but also he's not going to lose anything, then why wouldn't he just keep trying? Why would he settle for a draw? Strategically, consider the circumstances which could lead Putin to want to end the war. The first, of course, is total victory for Russia. That would mean he gets all the territory he wants, which may not be all of Ukraine, but a substantial part of it, that's recognised by the world as his territory, that Ukraine is not allowed to build up military defences for what's left, because he might want to go after the rest of it later. That obviously isn't acceptable to either Ukraine or Europe more widely, and it seems even Trump has accepted that this is not going to happen. Second possibility is that Putin runs a credible risk of ending up with less than he has now. But as nobody to the west of them wants to invade Russia, so Putin's obviously not going to be worried about it, despite the fact he talks about these moves as being defensive for Russia. He knows full well Russia is not under threat. If he stops the war overnight, that'll be it. There'll be no follow-up. The war will be over forever, right? Putin at the moment is not running the serious risk of losing the parts of Ukraine he's been occupying for years now, anytime soon anyway. So the way to make Putin fear losses is personal losses. Damage his strongman reputation back home. Hence Trump's instruction to target St. Petersburg, not only of immense cultural value to Russia, but the home of Putin's power base. If his oligarchs don't think Putin can protect them even in their own land, much less keep feeding their greed, then what's the point of allowing him to continue as president? And the thing about being a pirate king is you have to keep feeding treasure to your pirates. However, unless the US is now selling way more equipment to Ukraine than was being provided under Biden, I'm not entirely sure how Zelenskyy is able to step up enough to pressure Putin to that extent. It's true that he has the authorization now to strike certain targets inside Russia, which he didn't have until this year. But Ukraine's use for that is to target launch sites of missiles and planes that have been used to attack Ukraine. They're not, strictly speaking, interested in damaging things in Russia beyond what is used to attack Ukraine. And so the increase in military capability would need to be significant, wouldn't it, to put military pressure on Putin's power base. You would think economic pressure will need to be a part of the solution. Indeed, economic pressure is always the best solution. But for it to work, Russia would need to believe that Trump means it about further sanctions. And given his track record, I can understand how they're not taking it seriously at all. So the only way for Trump to demonstrate he means it will be first to apply them and second to stick with them. And he might have to stick with it for some time before they get the message that it's there to stay. Trump says Putin has 50 days. That takes us into September, round about the time he'll be visiting the UK, give or take. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that Putin won't have agreed to a ceasefire by then, at least not one that he keeps. Normally his ceasefires have been, oh, we'll have a ceasefire on this particular day. And then everyone complains, you're still bombing Ukraine. Oh, sorry, when I said ceasefire, I meant you ceasefire, not us. So will it be a real ceasefire? Not in the next 50 days, I suspect. Trump will then be asked what he's going to do about his tariff threat. Will he finally stand up to Putin? Because expressing frustration publicly, that's one thing, and it's better than being frustrated at Ukraine. Even the supply of weapons is useful, but it's been paid for by others. It's mostly a commercial arrangement. Will Trump do something himself to contribute to the end of the war? We may find out at the end of summer. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.